Oh, hello, my friend and my sister.
Oh, it's so good to see your face.
You
You've
as
been away
well.
for a while.
It has
Yeah,
been, it feels like it's been years. I know it hasn't been that long, Julie.
no, it's just been a couple weeks, but it's just been life. Yeah, life the musical.
I love that Life the Musical. Well, where do you find yourself these days?
So I am back in Prescott, Arizona. I had a really sweet visit in Albuquerque for a few
Mm.
weeks with my youngest daughter and son-in-law and granddaughter, and so much fun. Did some painting projects and hung out with a 2-year-old, which, is the most fun in the
Oh,
world is hanging out with a 2-year-old, 3-year-old.
mhm.
Uh, and, just getting time with, your adult kids who have moved away and, have lives and busy, things going on. It's a real luxury to get to hang out with your kids once they move along. So
Mm.
it was really sweet. Had a good time.
Have you found that sweet spot where you're still mom, but you're not mother? And so, you're mom, but you're also friend. You're not, when you don't have to do the discipline, so you have a chance to really enjoy each other.
Yeah.
Not that you
You
didn't
know,
enjoy each other before.
yeah, it is a sweet, different situation. You're no longer parenting, but you're still hopefully, what I hope I'm feeling with my daughter is you're still a safe place to land.
Yeah.
You're still a trusted kind of confidant, sounding board.
Hmm.
It's like what's said here can stay here, kind of that experience.
Hmm.
Because she's navigating the world of being a young mother, being a mother of a busy 2-year-old. And I would say my youngest daughter is more of an introvert, and she is raising an extrovert.
Oh my.
And that is an interesting parenting place to be in. And
Hmm.
she needs more time for herself as a woman, a mother. She needs more of that. And right now she's raising a little person, and it's not on the table yet, kind of thing.
Hmm.
So that kind of reality that you can't have it all, you have it all at different times of life, kind of
Hmm.
experience. And I just sort of shared with her that right now she's deep in the weeds. She's got a little person who, that for her, this is mama is her universe. And we're also in COVID 2020, which keeps her from putting her into maybe a little preschool daycare situation a couple of hours a week. She's just not willing to you know do that right now, which is fine. But yeah, so it is. And it was fun to have kind of have that place of, I think I want to paint the bathroom, and to have somebody in the house that says, let's do it right now, let's do it, to kind of champion getting stuff done when you're home alone, while your spouse is working, and you're dealing with a 2-year-old at home. Everything revolves around nap time. So it helps to have just another person in the house to wrangle while you maybe slip in and paint some trim. Yeah.
Hmm.
So we did a lot of creative problem solving around a nap schedule, and that was
Well,
fun.
although I'm not a grandmother yet, I hear rumors that there's also this sweet spot about being a grandmother that you're not necessarily parenting, so you really get to get down on the floor with that grandchild and be in that moment without having to switch hats from parent to playmate. You get to be the playmate all the time. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, I would say that's fair because, you know, it is a different role. And while, you know, sometimes you have to put some boundaries in place when they, especially when they're so excited and they just don't know what to do with that enthusiasm and they like put their teeth on your thigh. You have to remind them, don't bite.
Mm-hmm.
Because they just kind of sometimes, you know, don't know what to do with all that emotion or whatever, which is hilarious because I never had a biter, but we got a biter in the family.
Ah,
Mhm.
someone has creative
So,
ways to express herself.
yes. And I think, you know, what I recognize is her words are really finally starting to come alive. It's that's receding because the frustration of trying to communicate the whatever isn't the barrier.
Right,
Yeah. So
right. And I wonder about, kind of the chance to do over when we're grandparents. We've had the chance to reflect on our parenting style and our parenting experiences. And we have access to more of our inner wisdom when we become grandparents. So just thinking of bringing all of that in to being a grandparent and that looking back. Um, and it kind of brings us to today's poem.
I love it.
Um, I've been sitting on this poem for a couple weeks. The name of the poem is The Old One in the Wind. Um,
Mm.
yeah, and it is a poem about reflecting back on life, remembering. And it was one of those rabbit holes, Julie, that where I used to be fearful of the dark rabbit hole, I now embrace all that can be discovered in this rabbit hole. Because I first discovered this poem and this poet through another author. Her name is Mary Reynolds Thompson. And she referenced this poem, The Old One in the Wind, in one of her books. And there was something around the energy of this poem that Mary Reynolds Thompson referenced that I immediately had to find out more about this poem. I needed to know this energy. I couldn't
Mm.
find the poem anywhere. In this day and age, I couldn't find it on the interwebs anywhere. Anywhere.
Mhm.
So then I had to go look for the book. And
Okay.
this poet, her name is Clarice Short, I couldn't find her book of poetry anywhere.
Mm.
So it took me a couple weeks. I finally tracked down um, a used copy because this book of poetry is no longer in print.
Oh, even
So
better.
some of her poetry you can find in other anthologies, but to find her book of poetry, it's no longer in print, but I found
Okay.
it. So I'm talking about the poet Clarice Short. And I feel like I was late to the party on this one. Miss
Mm.
Short was born in 1910. And she moved on to other places in 1977. So she moved on when I was 10 or 11. And she has an amazing story, which there isn't a lot of information about. Um, But I'll tell you a little bit about her life, and I'll tell you what she says about not having so much information out there in the wild about her life. So she grew up in Kansas, and in Arkansas. Her family were farmers. She attended the University of Kansas, where she earned her BA, and a master's degree. And she went on to receive her PhD from Cornell University in 1941.
Okay.
And I just had to sit with that for a few breaths. A woman earning her PhD at Cornell University in 1941.
Right.
I want to know this woman.
She's a rare bird.
Yes. So
Mm-hmm.
she could have stopped there, but she didn't. So she went from Cornell University to the University of Utah, across the country, and she taught English at the in the English department for 30 years, starting in 1946. So she continued on until almost her death teaching. So I just thought, oh my gosh, a PhD traveling across the country to teach at university, in the 40s. She did earn quite a few awards. She was, let's see, she taught English and 19th century literature. She was active in the university life, being elected to the Theater Council in 1952. And while she was at the University of Utah, she was awarded for excellence in teaching, with an award named after her. She was president of the Rocky Mountain Modern Language Association from 1965 to 1967. She has actually two published collections of her poetry. Her first one is The Old One and the Wind, which was published in 1973, just 4 years before her death. There is a second book of poetry called The Owl on the Aerial, and it was published after her death. And actually, it was championed by her longtime mentee, Emma Lou Thane, who had been a student of Clarice Short's for several years. And then Miss Thane came back to the University of Utah to teach. And so they were mentor, mentee, but had a long, close relationship. So I haven't tracked down The Owl on the Aerial yet. That might be my next one.
Is that why you have earrings on today?
There you go.
I love it.
You know, that was totally, I'm just going to say that was Clarice Short calling to me at the last moment. So I was so, who is this woman? I want to know more about her, and I had a hard time finding any info about her. And she talks about this in this cover of this book. She's asked about her life, and she says this very interesting quote. They were asking, could you provide some biographical information so we could include it in the book? And Miss Short responds with, this account seems flat and dull to me of biological information. This account seems flat and dull to me. The interesting aspects of a biography are not the broad outlines, but the details. And those, the observations, the people and places that have stirred me are recorded in the poetry, if at all.
Oh, she liked being a mystery.
I feel like she's saying, if you want to know me, read my poetry.
Exactly.
And pay attention.
Wow.
to what I'm saying
Mhm.
in my poetry. I really, I admire that she didn't talk a lot about herself. Everything she wanted the world to know, she put in her poems.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah,
That makes you, you know, that kind of subtlety does make you want to know more because she, you know, maybe in her view she didn't see it this way, but she was a leader for those of us who came, you know, come behind. It was not usual for a woman of the 40s to achieve a PhD level education,
right.
you know. Did she go west because that's where the jobs for a woman were? I'm curious about that. That's a big stretch to go,
Mm-hmm.
you know, all the way to Utah in the 40s. What,
Right.
you know, that was, you know, yeah. So it is a curiosity.
Isn't it's very curious.
Yeah.
So the poem is The Old One and the Wind. And before I read it, I wonder, Julie, if you can offer us a way to kind of come to center and prepare ourselves to experience this lovely poem.
Yeah, I think we need a little sort of sound centering. And I do have a really sweet little, just short reading that will kind of help us, you know, prepare to receive Clarice's poem today. So we'll just take this couple of minutes or seconds to take some nice, long, slow, deep breaths. And I'm going to go ahead and play the tinctures and just kind of let this sweet sound, you know, fill you
Super.
and help you find your center. And from poet Mark Nepo today, I was inspired to share this message, which is to listen is to lean in softly with a willingness to be changed by what we hear.
The Old One and the Wind. She loves the wind there on the edge of the unknown world at 90 in her tall house. Any wildness in the elements is as welcome as an old friend. When the surgically patched elms and sycamores crack off their heavy limbs in the freak snowstorm of October, she rejoices. The massy hail that drives craters into her groomed lawn stirs her sluggish heart to a riot of beating. A cluster of cottonwood trees in the swale of the prairie, oasis now in a desert of wheat fields, is all that is left of the home place. No one is left to remember the days there with her, the playhouse sheltered behind the cowshed, the whirlwinds that made a column of corn shucks, winters when snow brushed out all the fences, springs when the white of the snow turned to daisies, wind bent as were the urchins who picked them. To her, in her tall house in the tame town, the wind that escapes the windbreaks of man's constructing blows from a distance beyond the young's conceiving, is rife with excitement of the world's beginning and its end. The world's beginning and its end.
Hmm. Well, I sure want to have a cup of tea with Clarice.
Imagine her sitting in the window of her tall house, reflecting
Yeah,
back on, living on the prairie as a child.
yeah, and just the visual of the elements, you
Mhm.
know, like you will come into this world, you will have this life, and then you leave it, and it just keeps kind of the elements just kind of keep coming on, and we are so impermanent, but the elements around us are not.
The
Yeah.
wind keeps blowing, the snow keeps falling, the
Mm-hmm.
trees keep cracking. It moves on. Mm. So yeah, a cup of tea in the window of her tall house, the three of us
Mm-hmm.
together.
Yeah. Clarice, what a mystery.
Isn't she a mystery?
Yeah. And
So
so she lived a very, she taught for 30 some years at the same university, same college,
university, right?
and published these books of poetry, probably touched how many hundreds of lives, in the thousands of lives with her teaching, and wonder how many of those classes she taught were actually poetry classes. That'd be
Right.
interesting.
Wouldn't that be interesting?
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know if any poets have emerged as a result of her influence.
Mm-hmm.
And do we know if she had family, children, husband, any of those
We don't know
details?
any.
None of
I
that.
have scoured. I've even found, some newspaper clippings from the city newspaper, from the university newspaper, but nothing about her life. She does add one more thing about her personal life and the way she approaches her work. She says, I have lived two lives, that of the farmer and rancher, and that of the scholar. The poetry is the product of both.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So, Clarice Short, University of Utah. So many questions, Clarice. You left us with more questions than we have answers for. So, I would
Yeah.
be curious um, about other, as people are listening to this poem or reading this poem, what sorts of things might you glean from her life? Because I'm going on what Miss Short says is that what she wants you to know, she has put into her poems.
Mhm.
So poems are so layered, and they reach each of us at different places. So if anybody has any other thoughts about Clarice and her life, please feel free to share in the comments.
Yeah, that would be fun to um, read what might have, inspired, touched, created questions for other people as
Mhm.
we're trying to sort of build a bio on a woman who did not necessarily find that to be very important.
And that might be her wisdom that by
Mhm.
not providing a lot of biographical information, um, what what we receive from the poem is what we need from the poem.
Right. Yeah.
So I can think about her, but it's in my imagination. And that
Mhm.
might be what I really need in this moment when I read her work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was beautiful. Will you read the first part of that poem
Yeah.
again?
She loves the wind. There on the edge of the known world at 90, in her tall house, any wildness in the elements is as welcome as an old friend.
Yeah, that any wildness in the elements is welcome as an old friend. That's beautiful.
In her tall house, in the window, drinking tea, looking out at all of her friends, the trees, the wind, uh, the the wheat, the dirt. If it's raining, these are all her friends.
Right. There
Mhm.
is something so comforting about the changing seasons. It
Mhm.
is in a way like greeting a familiar, a
Mhm.
familiar friend. You
Mhm.
know, I'm noticing as the leaves are starting to turn where I am, um, familiar places are starting to look like dazzling right now. They're starting to look a little bit different as they become golden and a little orange and a little red.
Mhm.
And it is it is a sweet thing when you live in a place and you see a dramatic shifting of changing seasons and the old familiar you know, changes that are comforting.
It is,
Mhm.
like welcoming an old friend and
Mhm.
remembering your experiences with that old
Mhm.
friend.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that one today. I love that one.
Yeah. You're
Beautiful.
welcome. I'm so glad you
Yeah.
enjoyed it. Yeah. And thank you for bringing your tinctures. It really helped me come into this moment and open to receiving, even though I've read this poem and sat with this poem, centering and reading this poem, I began to feel some things I hadn't felt of she's in the window in the tall house and she's receiving the changing season. She's receiving her friends in the elements. So thank you. All
Yeah. It was fun. My pleasure.
right. So
All
good to
right. So,
see you.
okay. And until we meet again next week,
I'll see
yeah, stay
you.
well. All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.